Stephen Noak is how I go by. I'd want to begin by telling you about some near-death experiences I've had. I was getting ready to go to the mall with my parents, who lived across the street, when I was 4 years old. My brother and I were having fun in a neighbor's driveway. I was riding a big wheel, which is a low-slung plastic tricycle. "Hey, we're going to the mall," my brother exclaimed as he moved across the road. The mall was like our own little Disneyland back then. Taking advantage of the space between the two parked cars, I quickly sprinted down the driveway. Another automobile was approaching at that exact moment. The car coming up from behind struck me hard as I went up between the parked ones. My big wheel became trapped under the back tire, and I ended up pinned under the car. I avoided being run over by the big wheel, even though I was crushed by it. That encounter's memory altered my life irrevocably. The first thing I notice is how colorless everything is. It looks like I'm watching a lightning blank screen. Subsequently, it opened once more, revealing my reflection with rolling eyes and all. I was leaning against someone when the screen went blank again and then came back on. I could sense their presence so strongly that I knew this had to be a person. The floor was visible beneath the figure's long silvery white hair and the bottom of their robe when I opened my eyes. When I turned to face it, the thing's face was entirely white. I was drawn to their face magnetically, and even though we couldn't communicate verbally, we could understand one another. It felt like I was entering another world as I drew nearer to this glowing object. I saw at once that this was a peaceful planet, free from hatred and suffering. I was dying to go, even though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. In retrospect, I think that was heaven. I had the impression that there was activity happening outside of my body. The creature informed me that they would return even though my time was not yet done. I'm not sure whether I truly comprehended the what or why of our conversation because most of it has since been permanently erased from my mind. The object gave me comfort after our talk, instructing me to "Put your head down, Stephen. There won't be any problems." After doing that, I woke up a few days later with toys in my possession. Let's carry on until we're about 33 years old. While I drove carelessly, I could sense the influence of my past experience, but I couldn't quite access those memories. I crashed into a phone pole, skidded around a corner, and before I knew it, I was traveling at around 70 miles per hour. I lost consciousness during the crash, and I had to go to the hospital to undergo surgery on my arm. Just as I was about to get up and leave, a sensation of security, tranquility, and peace washed over me. I felt afraid. This comforting sensation began in my brain and extended to my toes. I felt at ease right away. The same entity talked to me when I lay down again. Though it was difficult to recall that earlier encounter, I could still identify the voice as that of my 4-year-old self. The voice spoke again, and all the memories came flooding back. "Stephen, please lower your head," the item said. "Nothing at all will go wrong." Something in my mind changed when the apparition spoke. We had talked about energy and quantum physics, and everything made sense after my near-death experience when I was 4 years old. I was able to understand it now because I had the foundation knowledge that I lacked when I was 4 years old. The entity informed me that the field it showed me was the creation blueprint, and that it looked like a blueprint. I discovered that every living thing has a blueprint for both physical and mental healing while we were in the quantum field. Like a file on a computer, this initial blueprint, which I eventually understood to be love, was there. I discovered later that I was inside what appeared to be a wagon or medicine wheel. The center contained love. I was shown by the creature how to project our energy into the outside world so that we could see it. They showed me the paths that radiate out from my center and reach the perimeter of the wheel, allowing me to perceive reality. As a screen, the outer ring showed everything I had done up until that moment. Ascension, often referred to as soul retrieval, enables us to recover and come back to our true selves by returning these fragments of our soul. I received a quick rundown of the neurological system from the creature. He said that our conscious minds are like an operating system, and our subconscious minds are like a hard drive that stores all of our programming. This includes stuff like where I left my car keys or how to ride a bike, as well as trauma programs that make us react differently to certain situations. I started to implement these realizations gradually, and they were essential to my healing. In class, we also talked about quantum mechanics, entanglement, and the potential to affect someone else's energy field across great distances. Those who knew me well were taken aback because I had not conducted any formal research on the subject. It was quite frightening to witness an elderly woman fall to the ground when I returned to my job as GameStop's store manager. Although my studies in entanglement and quantum physics had prepared me for this was my first chance to put that knowledge to use. I placed my hand on her back, and she gave me a reassuring glance and said, "I'm all warm." Even though we weren't there for very long, I felt at ease. When I returned to work, I said to myself, that was really weird. People arrived to pick her up. As I considered it, I couldn't help but experience a surge of great energy that was similar to the thrill of opening presents on Christmas Eve, only 1,000 times more intense. I followed this spirit to other churches, hoping to learn a little more and maybe make some friends. This vacation taught me to search within myself for God, rather than searching outside of oneself. It's apparent that church was not where I found God. Psychic contacts began at that point. I started to see darker and lighter shapes everywhere. I had no control over the voices in my head once they had begun to speak to me. I could feel the pressure of someone pressing on the sides of my head every time they spoke. I was initially terrified because I had never dealt with something similar. I spent days sleeping poorly. It was only later on that I realized these entities were in charge of sending my identify into the united field. Every life form is interconnected and exists in a single field. In this space, we were one, unlike our world where everything is formed of atoms vibrating at different frequencies. It started to dawn on me that all those pictures were just digital replicas of myself. I didn't take care of myself as a child, which is why certain spirits were hostile to me. Many of my own negative, self-deprecating thoughts were reflected in them. I knew I had to let go of these bad parts of myself, so I made the decision to shift my energy. I began fusing several energies together, trying to change my consciousness. It marked a sea change. I reconnected with my inner kid through surroundings and activities, and I started to take charge of my life. It was essential to open up my closed neural system again. I had to recover from the energy I'd used on the field. People began coming to me for healing as I worked on this, for a variety of issues, including the exorcism of evil spirits. A good chunk of the puzzle had been answered for me. Later, as I sat with the light being, I was told about creation and the sacredness of everything by an angel, or what I eventually came to know as an Elohim. Along the road, I discovered two things. First, that we are all related, and second, that our behavior toward one another reflects our underlying ideals. They are inseparable. I experienced a deep sense of connectedness to everything throughout my near-death experience. The idea that there is no difference between any religion and that they are all basically the same, with different people giving them different definitions, hit me like a ton of bricks.